Okay, hello everyone. We still have some people joining in our lobby, so I'm going to give it another few seconds. Okay, I think we have everyone. Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome to the ERP Solutions for K-12 IT Leaders webinar. We are excited to have you joining us today for the last part of our webinar series on the Sparkrock ecosystem. But today we're exploring topics near and dear to K-12 right now, and IT in particular, around security, privacy, AI, data sovereignty, and more. And it's the peak of the week, often known as hump day. And since we're already halfway through the day, we're at that tipping point. And we hope this webinar launches a fantastic finish to the rest of your week with some great information. And we've got a number of exciting speakers. All right, so before we begin, I'm Meg Wilson. I'm a sales exec working with K-12. I know I've met some of you that are on this webinar today, so I want to thank you for joining us. We're hoping, to get lots of questions so that we can, at least from a chat perspective at the end, keep it interactive. Okay, but before we begin, let's dive into a few housekeeping items. Only the moderators and speakers will have access, will have camera access today. We do have a Q&A feature for any questions or comments you have throughout the session. So we'd like to encourage you to use that. We're going to make sure we address those questions at the end of the webinar. If we can't get to it, we will follow up with answers to your questions. In addition, a recording of this webinar will be sent to you within a week. So feel free to revisit any part of the discussion, and even if some questions come out of that recording, we're here to address them. So we'll make sure you have contact information to reach out to us. Okay, so you've met me as the host, but I'm really thrilled that we have a great panel of presenters today. I'm going to start off with Karen McGregor, who's joining us from Microsoft today. She's the Azure lead for Microsoft Canada's education team, and she helps customers across Canada. So again, I'm sure some of you have met Karen through the years. She's been with Microsoft for quite some time, but in addition has extensive experience in application architecture, design, deployment. She's worked with IBM, who actually is our next set of presenters. So from IBM, we have Brad Klink, Brad's a seasoned leader in K-12 education as well, manager of the professional services and consulting. So I know many of you would have met him as he works with private schools. He works with a lot of school districts in particular, and works with the team to provide innovative IT solutions for K-12. And working with Brad is James Atchison, part of that K-12 team, and he's got extensive experience working in leadership roles within K-12, working in technology, and he worked at school districts across the country, analyzing, supporting, and guiding their work to transform the use of technology. And I work with James a lot, and lovely, passionate person to work with. So I'm thrilled to have him joining us today. And then we're going to wrap up today's session with Wendy Brown. Wendy's from our team, and she's going to be speaking to sort of the compliance and things within our Sparkrock application that kind of seal that deal when it comes to IT and all the things that are important in that IT circle. Okay, so really quickly we'll move to the next slide because we have some exciting news. I'm going to get my colleague Bree. There we go. So we are really excited to introduce Stephen Marshall. And Stephen, I don't know if you have a chance to go off camera for a second. Stephen is our new Chief Security Officer. Again, Sparkrock totally understands the importance of security, privacy, and data sovereignty. And so we've actually got a role dedicated to security and ensuring our K-12s have everything they need from not only an information perspective, but clearly the security within our application. Stephen's been working in tech security and cybersecurity for over 20 years, extensive career with Windows and Linux systems. He's transitioned to working on security architecture, Azure and AWS. His focus is security, governance, and implementing tools like Sentinel and Purview. So we're super excited to have Stephen here. And I don't know, Stephen, if you want to just say a couple words before we move on.
Sure, definitely. Yeah, it's great. Thanks for being here. Sorry I won't be able to stay for the entire presentation, but I'm looking forward to see the recording. You've got a great lineup of panelists, and they're awesome. I've only had a little opportunity to work with them, but so far it's been really great. Looking forward to add my take on security and talking to the rest of you sometime soon.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. And again, any questions for Stephen directly, put them in the chat. We'll make sure that those questions get answered. Okay, a little bit about our agenda. So we're going to kick off today's session with Karen, and she's going to talk about Microsoft security. And you know, I want to make it clear that the reason that is really important is that our solution, Sparkrock solution, is an application within that whole Microsoft ecosystem. So we're leveraging all of the things that Karen is going to talk about today. And that's because we are and have been for decades now a Microsoft partner. But we're going to talk about that a little later in the webinar. And before we talk about that, after Karen finishes, we're going to hand it over to IBM, and they're going to talk about just the K-12 landscape, governance, and of course, no webinar is complete these days without touching on AI. And then we'll wrap up, as I mentioned, with a little bit about Sparkrock, and in particular around how we manage compliance within our application. And Wendy's going to walk through a little bit around that, the security roles and setup. So with that, we've got a big agenda. I am going to hand that over to Karen and get going.
Hey, folks, thanks for the chance to have this conversation. As Meg said, Dynamics and Sparkrock live within the Microsoft ecosystem. We're going to talk today about how Dynamics exists within this Microsoft security world and how you can use the key tools and services inside the Microsoft security platform to both protect your most critical information, protect your most critical users, and get the most out of this SaaS platform. As Meg talked about, Dynamics lives within the Microsoft Cloud ecosystem. What does it mean? Well, it's hosted inside of Azure, which means it takes full advantage of all the advanced protections that live within the Azure ecosystem. Those are the things you just don't have to worry about. Then there's the components of the Microsoft platform where we're really in charge of delivering the most secure platform onto which all this lives. When you go to a SaaS platform, that's really what you're hoping to get is I want this to be run in the most secure platform out there, and I want to make sure that my cloud providers have all of those components layered together to give me the best protections. But this is not an island, and this is what we want to talk about today. What we don't have is a little island off that's just sitting inside the Microsoft ecosystem where it's a black box. What we have is a SaaS platform with Dynamics that's deeply integrated within the kind of security tools where you can get the best, most secure, well-managed experience within this space. And that's this top layer where you can connect Dynamics with the services like Entra ID for authentication and permissions. You can connect it to the Microsoft security platform so you're getting the best signal and the best information out of your Dynamics environment, and you're making the right decisions from a security and compliance perspective for your most critical services. And I'm going to touch on those for the rest of the time I have here. The challenges, as many organizations have moved to a SaaS platform, is in essence this volume of signal, which is we've got a lot of different data sources out there. And if they are all islands and they don't all participate in the same ecosystem, they're really creating more challenges than they are solving. When I move a critical service to a cloud platform, in essence, your bad actors are there, they're there to target those platforms. You've got a broad surface area, and adding a new island into that creates a management challenge. I have to manage each individual service separately. And candidly, K-12 does not have the resources to go and validate and check all those different platforms individually. Noisy alerts and identity is a really critical part of this system. When we look at what is different with education versus other platforms, other environments, it's the sheer volume of identity based alerts, and the sheer volume of identities that even a relatively small school board manages, because you've got both staff and students, and not all identities are equal and not all platforms are equal, and yet we need to treat them specifically. Of course, there's a challenge of too many security tools. If I have to check each individual software as a service platform because I've got data spread around there, that's going to create more of an issue. So what we're talking about here is, how do I balance the value of my SaaS platform, which is what we want. We want a great hosted service, but we don't want to make this problem any worse. How do we do that? We want to bring this platform into the rest of our security ecosystem, and that's what we're talking about here. What are the principles to security? I want to keep it simple. This is all about identity. And I know that's a fraught word in education because you've got a lot of identities you have to manage. Managing identities can be really complicated because you've got complex situations with people with multiple roles, etc. However, when you're moving to a cloud platform, this is the time to at least do the best you can with identity in that cloud platform. Don't make the problem any worse, make it better. But focus on identity and secure identity first and foremost. Assume breach, trust no one. Even when we think about identities and we think about protecting identities, we do have to assume that at any point, any of those identities could be breached. So how do we look for all the signals to ensure that if at any point we've got a risky situation going on, we're reacting to it quickly? If we're not monitoring what's going on in those cloud platforms, it didn't happen. Again, if what the details of what's happening in those platforms are trapped within the platforms themselves, and I'm either not monitoring them, or if I am monitoring them, it's something we do on an infrequent basis, that's not going to help either. We want to bring all our signals together, and that's that last piece. I want really good signal. I don't want lots and lots of log files that people are going to have to go through when they have time, because it won't happen. We want really good signals, risk-based signals that we can take action on. And that's what we get out of this platform. What are the pieces? Well, of course, since I said identity, you know where I was going. We want to start with Entra ID, the identity platform that brings things together. And most organizations in Canada, the vast majority of our K-12 customers have adopted Entra ID as identity platform. For simplicity, for ease of use, single sign-on is wonderful, but then I can also start to put common practices wrapped around that. Maybe MFA, which is a great step forward. What we want to talk about is that when we have Entra ID there as our intermediary, we have more ways to have advanced protection. I want to lean in on this one specifically. Conditional access. What we're doing there is interposing a test for all of our logins to see, where are you coming from? What kind of device are you on? Is the device compliant? Is it a managed device? Is it an unmanaged device? Are we seeing risky signals within what is going on with that user's behavior? What application are we talking to? So all of those are signals that conditional access can capture, and then make a decision on how you want to access that. What does this mean for dynamics? Well, we can create a granular policy that says for our high privileged users, we want to say you have to come in from a managed device, maybe a specific location, and we have to see no risk associated with your user behaviors and your user patterns. Again, assume breach. That superintendent login, if it's risky, I want everybody to feel quite, be empowered to block, monitor, access. We want to use this as our test, and we want to have everybody be okay with that. If you're not doing that with the rest of your services, that's okay. We want to make Dynamics and Sparkrock the place for you to start and implement that. Secondly, Defender for Cloud Apps. This is the way that we give you super granular tools to manage software as a service apps. Again, because most of the signal in your environment could come from software as a service applications. And so what we want to do is give you real granular information about what is going on in the context of a SaaS application. We want to help you create policies for a specific application that both detects threats that are going on and also provides information on data that's happening inside of that application into your ecosystem. Defender for Cloud Apps, super important, and of course Dynamics is in the middle of that. Here's the way that this can register inside of an environment. And here's what's interesting here is when a threat happens, it's not isolated to a specific application or a specific platform. It moves between platforms. And that's because the bad actors know a lot of times these things are siloed. If you're just looking for threats in your email platform and you're not looking for threats in your ERP or your platform, that information may not be shared, and therefore you may not get that data acted on quickly. So what we want to do is bring all those signals from all those different platforms together so we get the most relevant risk data and the most relevant information of a compromised session that you can then act on. And you see how we're sharing those data across the different apps. We always give you proactive guidance. So sometimes we'll see other cloud app security platforms or CASBs. They'll give you, lots of interesting information. What we want to do is also give you proactive guidance. Do this, improve your security. Here's granular guidance, always to improve your posture, because the best security issue is the one you do not see. A couple other pieces before I wrap up. Information protection in Purview, and Stephen mentioned that in his intro. That's another way to really act on and define your risk policies when it comes to specific sensitive data. We want you to be able to define your policies and have that persist wherever that exists inside of your ecosystem. And this is the best example of a scenario that you want to see is if I've got a sensitive piece of data and that's been tagged and identified by my platform, I want that to travel with that data wherever it is. So if a user logs into Dynamics and extracts a file of data from us via a spreadsheet, I want information protection to know that that's sensitive data and that travels with the actual applications. That's what Purview and information protection is all about. Lastly, this is all connected together. So when we're talking about these pieces, when we're talking about Purview and cloud apps and conditional access, don't think about this as a new set of services or a separate little island. These are connected services that work all together. And lastly, these all integrate with the all-up security platform, which includes services like Sentinel, and Sentinel can pull granular audit monitoring data out of Dynamics, so you can then pull any activity level data into Sentinel, so you've got that full-on visibility inside your organization. So that's a quick trot through what I think the most key significant security tools you can leverage from Microsoft to better manage and secure your Dynamics platform. So Meg, it's back to you.
Thank you so much, Karen. That was great, a great overview. I'm just going to hand it right over to our friends from IBM. So if you guys want to take control, we'll move on.
Great, thanks,
Jane?
Meg. So recently met with the folks in Ontario and the School Board Association there to talk about AI governance. I'm going to just give, sorry?
I just want to make sure, James, that oh, there you go. I just want to make sure your slide was up. Perfect.
Okay, awesome.
It's there.
Great, Meg. Yeah, and so, first of all, why is IT governance not an IT problem? Certainly you've heard the data in the news with some things that have gone on with applications being used in K-12. There's concerns around data storage, what's going on with hard drives. We see lots of laptops still without encryption on them. We've got USB sticks around the necks of some teachers that we worry about. And then there's that whole conglomeration of all the different places where people can store things. And so governance really is much bigger than IT and has to be looked at the executive level. When we think about all of the different places that artificial intelligence can be used within an organization, it's just not just inside of the learning spaces. There's opportunities in each area of the business as well. And there's opportunities in facilities and transportation for AI to be used. So with all that being on folks' plates, how do you address the governance around that? So there's a number of great resources already in place, and this is an example of some of the frameworks that are available by this one from the Government of Ontario as a starting point. If the conversations haven't started in your organizations as well, there are examples in other provinces as well that you can draw on as a starting point. But really, when we think about what is it we're actually trying to deal with, and honestly, Gartner has done some great work on what they call the technology sandwich, not a stack, but a sandwich. And you're in the position where you have data everywhere of every kind. So I think about in the K-12 spaces, teachers and other folks having data in so many different locations based on whether they're using Google Classroom or Office 365 or some of the other tools that are out there in the Apple environment with the applications. And you've also got centralized data, your student information system, and of course, we're talking about Sparkrock today, or ERP systems. Inside of that, you've got the AI pieces as well. So is there embedded AI in the applications that you're using? Is there a bring your own AI, pi.ai in my back pocket or on the new Apple phones? What about the TRISM pieces? And TRISM, of course, is the trust, risk, and security management layer of this sandwich. And then finally, what about built AI? AI that's being built within your organization, such as chatbots and those type of things. If we K-12 that, the sandwich is certainly really different at the top, where there might be, as I said, data in Google, data in Microsoft 365, data in those Apple apps, and all of the different applications that teachers are using, you've got data everywhere. So you really have to think about where's your data when you build your AI sandwich. So then, if you're going to do governance, should it be a policy, a procedure, or a guideline? And one of our big pieces of advice with K-12 organizations is to shift from worrying about policies and administrative procedures and really get better at building technology guidelines. They're more agile, they don't require the bureaucracies, if I can use that word, to build and create. It just has to be agreed upon and then followed and adhered to. How can you help build those technology guidelines? We suggest using a RACES chart as a starting point. I've blurred some out because, of course, this is work that we do with organizations, but down the left-hand side, you build a functional categories such as strategy and governance. And then along the top, you put in the roles and responsibilities across your organization, CIO, secretary, treasurer, etc. And then you provide those sub-elements around activities, and you determine who's consulted, who's accountable, who's responsible, and who's informed, and map that process out. That exercise by itself in all the organizations we've done this work with has really been eye-opening and helped them build out their strategies in many different areas, not just governance. So really consider your data, build some KPIs around things, ensure you know where data is stored, ensure you know the access and the devices that are accessing that information, like Karen outlined earlier. And then do you have policies, procedures, or guidelines that make some sense around each of those data sets? Who owns it? Who has access? How is it backed up? What's the data in transit? What's in retention? What's the destruction policy? Those type of things. Okay, and then finally, before Brad jumps in, Gartner also suggests there's 5 trends that you need to pay attention to moving forward in terms of leveraging AI. And agentic AI is, the latest and the greatest, and you're going to see more new shiny objects, but having that AI agent that can do work on your behalf is coming down the pipes, already in place in a lot of places. There's efforts to change its growth, but that technical debt where version 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 continues to grow in many different applications. Location of data is everything. Karen mentioned that in her presentation as well, that having that one place to view things is really important. So knowing where your data is. Rapid pivot to AI, has really changed budgets. At some point, you're going to get an ROI where it will be self-funding because it'll create its own revenue gain. And then finally, AI product and service innovation is the #1 CEO goal in industry, and things to consider in that realm. So that was short and sweet. I hope it helped really identify some things to consider on your governance journey. And I'm going to pass this over to Brad.
Thanks, James. That was great.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Oh, we have a little echo. There, Brad, would you mind to just speak?
Let's
and I'll
try that.
There, it's gone.
Perfect. Excellent. So thought we would just spend a couple of minutes on security. It's always a relevant topic. Obviously, Karen's touched on it. James has touched on it. Really where I thought I would go is talk a little bit more about just some broader concepts and what's happening lately across the country. So obviously lots of things in the news lately. Really, it's pretty much barely a week goes by that you don't hear about a district or division across the country with some type of an incident happening. And the attacks are becoming more and more sophisticated. If you do any reading on dark reading or some of the different blogs that are out there, just the different types of attacks and the way they're going about them. Certainly lots of, phishing and things are still happening, but more sophisticated, more personalized attacks. And certainly we'll talk about identity, and Karen really touched on it. And it's so important these days because more and more, the second an attacker gets a foothold in your environment, they're trying to use internal methods to scam users and things like that. So it's really important to keep your staff up to date and think about different ways to protect your environment because it's constantly changing. And then data is the theme that you're going to hear again and again. Data is everywhere, as James and Karen mentioned. We see home drives, we see local shares on file servers, OneDrive, Teams, Google Drive, Google Classroom, online files, and then all of these different applications and online services where data is. So it really does become sort of like a spider web, trying to map out and keep hold of all of this data and figure out where is it, how do we keep an eye on it, how do we structure it, how do we secure it. So ultimately, data mapping becomes a really key part of this whole thing. And then thinking about those data residency pieces and data privacy and data governance, again, it becomes more and more challenging in today's landscape with where things are. So I always like to then pivot and say, well, what do we have to think about when we talk about data? And the very first thing is, again, that use of valid accounts. So in the past, it was trying to phish people and trying to, exploit things. Those are still really big. This data here in the top right-hand corner is from the IBM X-Force report, comes out every year. And it's interesting comparing the trends from 2022 to 2023, the 2024 one I haven't seen yet. But it's interesting to see how valid accounts really jumped. It almost doubled. And that's the idea of getting access to a real user's live account and using it to manipulate other users, or simply say, what does that user have access to in this environment? What could I get just as this user? Their email, what systems do they have access to, all of those different types of things. So thinking about security from that user-centric perspective is really important. And then certainly phishing is one of the ways that they're getting in. But the other one that's also important is when you look at the numbers in the bottom right, you'll see the trend in terms of reported vulnerabilities. In 2024, again, broke the records, over 35,000 known vulnerabilities, and that's only what was actually reported and what's out there. So again, really important to kind of keep these pieces in mind when thinking about security. You certainly have to consider the applications that are running themselves. So what do we do when we think about security today? We always start with the data everywhere conversation because it just is so relevant these days. A lot of the attacks we see are not as much about getting in and necessarily encrypting everything. Still certainly a big goal that a lot of attackers have. But a lot of the time it's just, what can I exfiltrate? What data can I take right away? What do I have access to with a student, a teacher, a payroll clerk, whoever it happens to be that they can get that level of access for? So it's really important to create a data map and understand where is your data located, what is the most important data, what's the critical data, what's got sensitive information in it, and then creating a plan to try to amalgamate it where possible, to classify it. And then there's lots of great tools that are out there to protect that data. And Karen touched on some of them earlier. And depending on your environment, there's a variety of different tools that you could use. And then really shifting your thinking to people are the new firewall. So it used to be all about the device you logged into, and it had different applications that could open this console or that console or get into a share. It's really more about the user these days. The user is that digital fingerprint that gets you into all these different systems. So again, protecting people is so important. Karen touched on multi-factor authentication, conditional access, least privileged, and then really just thinking about those critical systems with the sensitive data, doing those data reviews on them, thinking about who has access, do they really need access, or could I give them a just-in-time type of access? And a lot of this comes in, especially when you're doing migrations to the cloud. If you're not there already in Microsoft or in Google or whatever you're using, it's a great opportunity when you're doing those migrations to reclassify that data, to really look at where it is, move it with purpose and with intent, classify it, create folders, create directories, create groups, whatever it happens to be. And then training your staff is just as critical as ever. And it's one of those things that always, nobody loves to do their cyber awareness training every year, but it is so important because it just keeps training all the time. And the approach we try to take is do you really trust whoever's calling you on your phone approach? When I look at my phone, if I don't know the number and they're not in my contacts, I'm probably going to let it go to voicemail and apologize to the person afterwards, because it's just an environment now where it's so hard to trust anything. People's voices can get recorded. There's all of these different types of things happening, and it's only going to get more and more sophisticated as attackers start to use AI and some of what they do. So again, training your people to, unfortunately have a little bit of distrust in their day-to-day routine is not a bad thing, because it's going to help to protect your environment. And then thinking about patching, as I showed in the last slide, the number of vulnerabilities, it just keeps growing and growing every year. And more systems that were traditional on-prem systems are moving into bigger ecosystems and environments. So patching is really important. And when we think about your ERP system, again, you've got the software layer of the ERP, but you've also obviously got the VM or whatever it's going to run on. And then you've got that virtual layer, seeing lots of attacks lately on the virtual stack. So there's a lot of things that are happening there, and that's why patching is so important. But it is also a great perspective to say, hey, if we were going to move our ERP system, moving to that SaaS hosted application, making sure its data residency is in Canada, it's going to take some of that load off of your team. So certainly a potential win that you could have there. And then thinking about all those people and all of the data when you're making that kind of move. If you're going to move to Sparkrock and you're going to have it hosted in Canada, it's a great chance to do that data mapping exercise, to really reclassify some of that data, to get rid of the data that you don't need. And that's a big thing that's come up lately. And it's very relevant for ERP systems, because we all love to keep the historical data as long as we can. Lots of organizations like to. Sometimes there's regulations around how long you have to keep it. The challenge is, if you ever are breached, there's all that back data that people have access to. And that's where we've seen, unfortunately, across the country, where people have been breached and they've had to buy identity protection insurance and things like that for people going back decades sometimes, because they had all of that data in there. So again, thinking about your data retention is really important, along with how you protect it. And then just from an overall trends perspective, as Karen touched on, MFA, conditional access, these are happening all across Canada. That's fantastic. Whether you're in Microsoft, whether you're in Google, whatever environment you're in, putting these types of controls is really important. Certainly, Entra ID has so much power and capability. As more and more systems are tying into it, it's really important to look at that whole ecosystem, because there are a lot of different settings in there. There's lots of different ways you can authenticate, whether you want to cross-authenticate your Google environment to do a type of single sign-on. So again, lots of potential in there. And then depending on your Microsoft licensing, if you have it, look at your A3, your A5, enable some of those features, optimize some of those features, take advantage of it, because there are some great pieces in there that can help to protect your data. The next piece would be really that data mapping and classification is something that every district, every division should really be thinking about going through that type of an exercise. And it's time consuming. It takes a while. But again, if you're going to do any kind of a migration, whether you're going to migrate your ERP system, your HR system, your SIS system, if you're going to do a OneDrive or Google migration or migrate to Teams, perfect time to go through that exercise, map your data, classify your data, think about those levels of access, and then certainly try to automate when you can. Put in some type of a user lifecycle automation process, reduce the risk of those manual mistakes, and make sure that the automation is based around least privilege access. And then as we kind of move down, we get into a lot of the other pieces that are key, the email protection. Again, if you're going to change your deployment methodology, if you're using Microsoft devices and you're moving to Intune, integrating things like Defender, having a managed SOC potentially. And then absolutely anytime you're making any kind of a big systemic change, migrating a big system, migrating a data center, whatever it happens to be, really having the rigor around vulnerability assessments, doing them frequently, and doing the penetration testing at least once a year is highly recommended. Because again, when you do any of these big lift and shift operations, there's always a potential for something to change. And the last pieces are, what are your contingencies? So do you have that up-to-date incident response plan? Do you know how to use it? Have you done some tabletops around it? What about business continuity planning for something that's not a cyber event, but all the other potential things, windstorms, ice storms, you name it, that can happen that are out there, big snowstorms, and make sure you've got that. And then certainly focus on your backup, harden it, and look for that immutability tier. And there's a lot of options around that. And that's the quick security update.
Thank you so much, Brad. Appreciate that. And thank you, Karen, James, and Brad. You all shared some really useful and actionable item. I love what you mentioned about data, because I'm with you. Everybody wants to bring in all their data, but sometimes that can create challenges beyond just the potential risk of access to that data, but also the challenge of trying to implement a solution and also bring in that data that might be in a different format. So really good information from all of you. Appreciate it. So before I hand it over to Wendy, I want to ensure everyone understands why Sparkrock offers a unique offering from a security and privacy management perspective and just an ERP application management perspective. And Karen did touch on this in terms of how Sparkrock is in this Microsoft ecosystem. But I wanted you to all understand that what we are is we're really effectively a set of curated apps that sit within this Microsoft Business Central solution and the Microsoft ecosystem, including Azure. So, what that means is you get this cloud optimized ERP solution, but you also get to take advantage of all the security, privacy, and all the things that Karen was talking about. And, you know, we as a company are continuing to invest in the applications that we offer within that ecosystem. I mean, I know you all know that we've acquired Assembly earlier this year, but we, in addition, have a super exciting announcement that I'm going to just speak to really quickly, that we recently acquired School Day. And School Day is an application that offers a comprehensive set of tools combining payments, e-forms, communication, and more. So you have, you know, automated income receiving, which is simplifying collection of payments, all the form stuff that some of you probably have used with different applications. So a really great fit with Sparkrock's finance and Sparkrock's SIS application. So there's going to be more coming on that, but I just wanted to make sure you are all aware. We are super excited, and I know many of the customers and prospects I talked to have been looking for some alternatives for managing that. So really great news on that front. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Wendy, and Wendy's going to talk about the compliance within the application, and yeah, then we'll wrap it up from there with your questions.
Thank you, Meg. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here. So for the next part of our session, I'm going to be taking you on a bit of a journey. We're going to be looking at how we can put into practice a lot of what we just learned from Karen, James, and Brad. Things like how can you segregate your duties. As you can see from this visual, Sparkrock 365 has a tremendous amount of features and functionality, but not everybody needs access to all of the features and functions, and not everybody needs access to all the data. And so as we go through this journey, we're going to see how in Sparkrock 365, in our 100% cloud SaaS model, you're able to easily integrate with the Azure Entra security groups, as well as segregate the duties and the roles that the different people in your organization have, and how you're able to configure those within the system. And we're also going to look at the administration tools for managing your hosted application. And we're also going to look at the integration with the greater Microsoft productivity suite. So being able to integrate with Outlook or share in Teams, or even edit data right in Excel in this preview here of our application. We're also at the end, as I think Meg alluded to, we've got a treat. We're going to give you a preview of the soon to come Copilot AI, which will be part of our finance solution, introduced first to finance and then later to grow out to our other solutions as we move forward. So with that, I am going to exit out, or I'll leave the PowerPoint there, but I'm just going to share my screen, and I'm going to just share my application here. And maybe Bree, can you just give me a thumbs up when you're able to see that?
You are good.
Thank you so much. All right. Okay, so as I mentioned, the first thing I want to introduce you to here in the live demo is the concept of role centers, or personas, for example. So here you can actually see I'm in the system right now in the role center of a security administrator. And we're going to explore some of these other role centers here. But the important thing to know that as the security administrator, I'm able to configure which role centers would be available in my school district. So for example, here we can take a look at the profiles and roles, and here we can see all the different types of roles that I have set up in my demo environment. We can see whether or not they're enabled or if they should be a default role center. But as we drill into this, we're able to see on each of these role centers, we're able to customize the experience that the users in those role centers will have. So what that means is, let me just load up my customization here. So for each role center that I want to have in my organization, I'm able to decide exactly what is going to show and what isn't going to show. So for example, if I wanted to hide something in this role center, I would just use the customization option here, and I could hide or move things, or I could even add additional functions into these screens. By using the plus field, I'm able to choose different actionable menus, dashboards, and so on that would make each role center unique. And so once you have your role centers defined, as we do here, they then are linked up to your users. And so if we look at our user settings, for example, and here's all the different users I have in my demo environment, and we can see that each one is assigned to a role center. So that is going to determine which of the role centers they have access to based upon their job duties. Now, as we think about the integration with the Azure Entra ID, that works hand in hand with our permission sets. So for each of those security groups, you would assign different sets of permissions. And for each set of permissions, you're able to determine whether or not the users would have a read-only permissions, or will they have the ability to insert data? Will they be able to modify or delete? And so this is very granular. And those permission sets then are attached to your security groups, and those security groups are aligned with your Azure Entra security groups. And so what that means is that when you add a person to your security group in Azure, they then automatically would have access to the group of permissions that are set here within Sparkrock 365 via the permission set. So the permission sets get assigned to the security groups, and the users are added into the security groups in your Azure. Now, a couple of other things that you can see how we would put into practice in monitoring your data and keeping your data safe is the ability to have change log entries. And you can control which fields and data that you're going to get these entries on. And so you're able to, as the administrators of your system, to determine exactly which fields that you would want to have those on. So for example, I'm just going to go quickly to the setup so you can see the tables. And we're going to see this in action when we go into some of the other role centers as we go on this journey today. But here, for example, you can see on my vendor record, I have it set up to log all fields for both insertion, modification, as well as deletions. And so I'm going to show you in a little bit how you are able to drill down on that right at the record level, but also you get this change log entries table that you can analyze and run reports and review at any time as well. Brad and James mentioned about data mapping exercises and really classifying your data. And so within Sparkrock 365, you actually have a data classification worksheet. So that allows you to determine for each field element, you're able to classify it as either unclassified, sensitive, personal, company confidential, or normal, and have different policies around each of those classifications. So let's put on our IT hat for a minute here, and I'm going to come into what's called the admin center. And so the admin center is going to allow you to view your different environments. So for example, my demo environment is in the production environment. And in these tools, you're able to see right here which region is my data stored in. So we are in Canada. The data is compliant with data residency. You have other tools here as well, such as the ability to copy data, contact support, but also see all active sessions that might be going on within the environment right now, as well as being able to cancel those. Now, all of our customers enjoy a production environment as well as the ability to have 3 sandboxes. So you are able to manage those here within the admin center and have complete visibility on those environments. So let's just come back over to our Sparkrock 365, and I am going to change roles here. I'm going to come into into my accounting manager role. So I'm going to come out of the security administrator role, and we'll come into our accounting manager. And so what we're going to look at here is we're going to go on a bit of a journey and look at the really tight and seamless integration with the rest of the Office 365 productivity suite. A great place to see that is here in our vendors. And so this is a vendors page that I'm looking at right now. If I was to be looking at my purchase orders or my invoices, I would have the same type of functionality that I'm going to show you here. So this is pervasive across all of your pages within the application. And that's the ability to open your files in Excel, edit in Excel, share in Teams, or simply copy a link and share it out. Now, even though you might be sending somebody this link, whether it's by Teams or email, they have to have the appropriate permissions in order to be able to view that data. When we talk about the ability to edit in Excel, this does a secure linking of the data. So let me just bring over my Excel here so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And so we're going to see from the page I was just viewing in Sparkrock, that data is going to populate in my spreadsheet here through the data connector. We can see this. And if we were to make any changes to this data, so for example, on this first vendor record, I'm just going to change my purchasing code and I'm going to change it to WB, for example. And so any changes that you make, you then are able to publish those back up into your application. So we can see here, publish is successful. And let's just take a look at this for a second. So here's the vendor that I changed. And if you recall, when we were over in our security administrator role, I have the change logs turned on for my vendors. So we are able to see right at that vendor level all of the changes that might have happened. And it's going to record that with what the old value was, as well as what the new value is. So you have complete transparency of who made the change, when they made the change, and what the change was. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about some of the integration you can look forward to. Integration with your Outlook is seamless. So if, for example, I was to send an email to this vendor, I can use Word templates to help me to format these emails documents. So this is all integrated. And when I send this off, it's actually going to show up. Let's go ahead and send this email. So Jennifer is going to get an email from us now. But if we take a look here, we can see all of the rest of the Office 365 productivity suite that is integrated. And simply, we'll just take a look at my Outlook. We look in our sent items. And so here's the email that I had just sent Jennifer today. Part of that integration is the ability to also have a link into the Sparkrock through the Outlook app that can give you insights on the users, as well as the ability to create invoices or send documents into the application. You'll also notice here in Sparkrock 365 that we have attachments. Those attachments as well can be integrated with your OneDrive. So just by clicking on Open in OneDrive, it'll send this attachment up to OneDrive and allow me to have it stored there as well as here in the application. All right. So last but not least, I want to give you a quick preview of the Copilot AI that will be coming to our product this year. And so I'm just going to come into the preview environment that I have for that. Just give me one moment. And then we will pass it back and we'll start taking some questions. Oops, sorry, one second. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice when this is implemented is you'll have Copilot Chat integrated right into your finance solution that will live right alongside your dashboard, as you can see here. It has three main functions: find, explain, and ask. The find is looking for information against your business data. So for example, here I'm going to ask a very simple question. How many posted purchase invoices this year? And so it's going to do a look at the last year for me. It's going to do some simple calculations for me, telling me how many posted purchase invoices I had. And as well, you're going to see for every query you make of the chat, it's going to give you a reference back to how it found that information or why it came up. And so here we can see there's 56 posted purchase invoices this year. It shows me a few of them, but I can click right here to go directly to that page. And on this page, what you're going to see is my results here for those 56 posted purchase invoices. It's already created the filter for me in regards to the date range. And from here, I can access other pervasive AI tools. So for example, the ability to analyze this list right from here, but using natural language. So for example, I'm just going to put in in words what type of report I want, click on generate, and it's going to take the data that I have here and create the report. If I want the report maybe to be a little bit different, I'm going to drill down by invoice, for example. I would just give it additional instructions and the report will change accordingly. And so I really do truly believe this is going to change the way our users navigate throughout the system. There are a number of additional AI tools that are pervasive throughout the application. What we just saw here is available on every page, so that experience can be enjoyed across all of those user roles that we looked at. So that was a brief overview of Sparkrock 365 security administrative roles, how we can integrate with your Entra IDs, and as well as with the rest of the Office 365 productivity suite. So I will now hand it back to Bree for taking questions.
Yeah, and before Bree does so, I just wanted to mention, I mean, we went quickly and we focused a little bit just on this one aspect of the application, but I wanted to make sure that everyone, because we have a cross section of people joining us today, are aware that, you know, beyond what we've talked about with Microsoft and leveraging that platform, we've also got some very specific provincial functionality required with respect to security, as an example. And one thing that we always do is regionalize for each area. So for example, in the province of Alberta, For our CIS, we have PASI. In BC has some different requirements. So we make sure that we're regionalized for each of the provinces that we're working in. Now, Bree, I was going to start off and just mention there was a question in the chat, and thank you very much for handling that, Karen. Sorry, am I still on? Everybody hear me? Just had a little
You're good.
technical flip here. Sorry, there's something else popping up here. Excuse me.
Got a handful of really good questions.
Great. So there was a question in the chat. Will there be advantages if we already use all the MS Azure security solutions that Karen mentioned? And Karen, thank you so much for addressing that. As Karen mentioned, the main advantage is protection of your sensitive data in Dynamics using the same tools you're already using. So no need for extra tools. So that's certainly an advantage. And also services like intra-IAD, conditional access, are discounted if for organizations that have the A3 and A5 security licensing bundle. I also wanted to mention, as a Microsoft partner, there is discounts for K-12 from Microsoft on the ERP licensing side that we also offer through our partnership. So you will take advantage of all those discounts that Microsoft offers. Okay, we have another question.
My favorite question, because this always comes up. If we use Google Suite, not Microsoft, would it be problematic to set up new integrations? And how quick is it to set up?
Yes, there is not a problem. We can set those up as well. I mean, obviously, Wendy talked about some of the advantages of using the Microsoft platform, but we have clients using Google as well.
Then we also have a question. With Sparkrock, is there a module for electronic payments for parents, either via POS machine at the school or online? How is that handled and secured? And do parents need some sort of identity setup in the ERP?
So perfect question. I mentioned very briefly about our exciting acquisition of School Day, and that will offer that ability to do payments within the school. So for schools, brand new acquisition. We're only a week and a half into it. So we're going to be releasing more information on that, but absolutely, we will have some great information we can share on that.
Yes, and they aren't in the ERP necessarily, right, Meg?
Absolutely. They're not right within the ERP. It's an add-on application so that you've got a little bit of that segregation as well.
Sparkrock and Southeast College introduction call.
Good old technology.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have someone pinging me through Teams right now and now calling me on the phone, so it's distracting me a bit. Okay, is the Microsoft Copilot integration with the ERP? Yes, that's coming in 2025.
Yes, later this year, you will see Copilot sneaking into Sparkrock right in the ERP, where you will be able to ask the finance section questions, and it will be sneaking into HRP and SIS, and maybe even School Day later. But we're starting with just one.
Thanks, Bree. I know we are already 3 minutes over time. I don't see any questions in the Q&A. Great. So with that, I want to thank all our speakers. I know Karen had to drop off, so we'll get her later. I thank you all for your time today, and hope you have a great rest of your day. We're looking forward to receiving some more questions. If there's more information you need, please don't hesitate to reach out. Email is connect@sparkrock.com, or you can go directly to our website and there's a link to connect with us there as well. Right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.